The COVID-19 pandemic has infused a lot of cash and a lot of energy into the concept of developing inhalable and intranasal vaccines, therapies, and prophylactics. What was once sort of a peripheral pet project of a few has become a playground for many biologics developers, with BCC Research projecting the inhaled biologics market to hit $4 billion in the next 4 years, while the intranasal drug market is pegged to hit more than $64 billion by 2023. I'm Matt Pillar. This is the Business of Biotech. And today we're talking about the promises and the challenges of developing therapeutic molecules that can be administered intranasally with the CEO of a new transatlantic biopharma company with operations in Amsterdam and Boston. The company is called Leyden Labs. The CEO's name is Koenraad Wiedhaup, and I'm thrilled he could join us. Koenraad, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Great to join, Matt. I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's an honor, and as I noted in our preamble, I am likely to say your name 4 or 5 different ways throughout the course of our call today. But Koenraad Wiedhaup, is that pretty close?
That's very, very good. Yes, and it's also fine to do the Koenraad Wiedhaup, which is much more the English version of that. Yes, but it's actually quite correct. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sure to devolve into the the American pronunciation through the course of the conversation. So I want to start with the big picture. Obviously, many of us have been heavily affected by the COVID-19 global pandemic. I just read a story the other day in the news about a woman who spent lockdown in Antarctica. And, even someone like her, it doesn't matter whether you've been affected directly by the disease, someone you know or love has been affected. We've all been affected. It's been disruptive. Leyden Labs is developing a proactive approach. We're very reactive right now in our response to the pandemic. Leyden Labs approach is a proactive one to help fight future viral outbreaks. I'd like to just kind of start out by getting your perspective on how your approach kind of differs from the current approaches that we're seeing to pandemic preparedness, and why.
Yes, no, Matt, very happy to do so. And before I go into what we exactly do, it's just how we, let me take you back to the first lockdown last year here in Europe. Then we met actually with the founding team, so Jaap Goudsmit, Dinko Valerio, and Ronald Bruss, back at the garden of Dinko. And we thinking about how can we make sure that these pandemics will never happen again. Everybody was, rightly so, by the way, don't get me wrong, focused on SARS-CoV-2. And we thought, can we now find a way to prevent the next pandemic, be ahead of the next virus? And we started with that right away. And to go to your question of what we're trying to reach, so we all try to live our life to the fullest, right? We want to be able to hug our loved ones, go to sports games, travel, but also, just work and be with other people. And we were not able to do that, right? The current pandemic has caught us off guard, and the economic burden is enormous, and everybody has been challenged by the crisis. People losing their loved ones to the disease, becoming ill themselves, losing their jobs, feeling mentally pressured. But it's also in the smaller things of my mother not be able to hug my daughters, for example. So it really showed that we were not ready. We have very broad measures. Which is, for example, social distancing, wearing face masks, all very important. And then, unbelievably, as humanity, we actually found a vaccine and also produced it with many companies are doing that in a great way within a year. But it still takes a year for that, and they're all reactive, as you say. So what we are developing is a proactive approach where we actually can protect against the broad spectrum of viruses, so existing viruses, but also new ones, so that we are ahead of the next virus once it comes, that we have the products to protect us even before there's a vaccine, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So before we get into some specifics there, take me, let's dwell for a minute on that meeting in the garden. So this was a meeting between, this is intriguing to me. So there's this kind of informal get together between you and the 3 folks you mentioned, some folks from Crucell, which Am I pronouncing that correctly? Crucell?
Yeah, Crucell. Yes.
Crucell, yeah, which is now a Janssen company. Am I correct?
True. So Crucell was bought by J&J, and actually now forms also the platforms form the basis of the J&J COVID vaccine as well. Of course, J&J developed that further.
Right. Yeah. So here you are sitting in the garden with these guys, and you're having a conversation, sort of a big pie in the sky conversation about the prevention of pandemics like the one that we're currently struggling with. Paint that, I guess, take your brush and paint that picture in a little more detail for us. How did the conversation come about? What did it sort of lead to, and how did it ultimately lead to the development or the genesis, if you will, of Leyden Labs?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it was in the beginning of the pandemic, and we had actually an offline text conversation on how this could be, and how could we actually have done this differently as society to be ready for that. And then we decided, let's get together and think about it, and from our joint experience, think about what we then can do. And then from the previous developments that scientific experience of, for example, Jaap Goudsmit, but also the others, how can we create these products that actually can prevent not only against virus that we already know, but actually much broader than that. So then we decided, in that garden where we said, okay, we have to do something about that, and not, in a year or 2 years, but right now. And we actually started the company, I think, only weeks later. Mm-hmm. And we worked as a fully virtual company. So we could also start right away, given the network of the different people involved, to start with external labs. Really, I think only 4 weeks later, to also develop, start developing the different programs and finding the IP, for example, to start right away and not wait until we have built out the lab. So to immediately start there already on the next virus, while we're of course still at the beginning of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now you came into this conversation and the genesis of the company from a unique perspective. From by my estimation, you unlike the startup founder who comes at it from a scientific background, or the startup founder who comes at it from a capital background, you spent the bulk of your career at McKinsey & Company. Is that correct? Leading up to the foundation of Leyden Labs?
Yes. Yeah. So I have actually a scientific background from 2 universities here in the Netherlands, Delft and Leiden. And then actually started my career in San Francisco at a biotech company in the business development. And then I really realized I want to be on that intersection between science and business, bringing the innovations from the lab to the patients or people that need them. And then I started indeed at McKinsey. I did also my MBA again in New York. At McKinsey, I worked most recently as a partner, serving both larger pharmaceutical companies, but also biotech companies, and helping also, for example, young biotech startups to really set up their company also on the side. So yeah. Coming from a, I guess, different background and already having worked at multiple biotechs before.
Oh, okay. Yeah. What have you? So there's a follow-up question to your experience at McKinsey. You spent time there consulting and kind of mentoring and helping new and emerging biotechs get on their feet, I should say. Yeah. What have you learned coming from that sort of theoretical counseling type position to your first foray into launching a biotech? Give us a little color on that. What have you learned about kind of the theoretical approach versus the practical approach?
Yes, no, I of course, very interesting step also, where I learned a lot. At McKinsey, I worked, of course, with great, fantastic colleagues and clients where I learned a lot from, and I try to also, really take that on every time. And now it's, again, fantastic learning curve on to see, of course, also having to really deliver against all that, which I felt also at McKinsey, right? Because I was for a longer time with the clients, so really felt part of that team as well. But still, it's then also a next level, a learning curve to basically work. The great thing is I work with very experienced people, so people that have done this before. Not only the founders, Dinko, Ronald, Jaap, but also the board that we have, like Onno van der Stolpe, who is the CEO of Galapagos, James Shannon, former chief medical officer of GSK, Rich Whitley, Dr. Rich Whitley, who works closely also with Dr. Fauci on the US COVID response, and for example, John Martin, who very, very sadly passed away about 2 months ago now, who was an unbelievable person and also added tremendous value to Leyden Labs in his inception in that first half a year to a year. And then now with board members such as David Schenkine and Stephen Knight and Eli Kazin of our investors. So from those people, I'm learning tremendously the new things of also what it means to be a biotech CEO. So that has been a great ride. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now you guys are obviously it's early days. You were founded. Was it the beginning of this year? Is that correct?
No, we were founded in June last year. So this meeting to take you back there was in May, and then we immediately founded the company in June. We got the first investment round, and then another investment round later in the beginning of this year.
Yep. So it's like I said, very, very early days. But tell us where you've come along in terms of the concept that you're pursuing. I know that it's not like we can sit here and talk about clinical data just yet. We're preclinical, but what's the concept? What's the approach that you're aiming to achieve to protect the population from this broad range of viruses?
Yes. Maybe the approach first, and I can also explain from where we are at the moment. This proactive approach, which I mentioned, right? How not to protect not only against one specific virus, but against a whole broad range of, actually, in our case now, respiratory viruses. Really falls down in two principles. So one is we target the commonalities of viruses, where vaccines, rightly so, I think, target a specific point on the virus. We look at what are the commonalities within those viruses. And secondly, we attack the virus where it attacks us. So that's the intranasal administration, because that's where the virus, of course, enters, respiratory viruses in that case, which are most likely to cause pandemics. So on that first one, there are millions of viruses still out there, right? In nature, if we talk about just mammalian and avian viruses, there are 1.7 million viruses out there and hundreds of thousands of them could still jump over to men. Now, but these viruses exist, of course, in families, and these families have commonalities, and that's where we're looking at, to find these commonalities and to target those, so that we don't only target, if we talk about coronaviruses, we only don't target SARS-CoV-2, but also, say, MERS or common cold-causing coronaviruses, or, very importantly, a next coronavirus that might jump over. So that's that commonalities approach where we're working on. And secondly, the intranasal approach is really to make sure that the infection never can get started. So if we protect right in the nasopharyngeal area, in the nose and the back of the throat, then we can stop the infection there before it actually, the virus can infect the lower respiratory tract or transmit it to other people. So to stop it really at the inception, so to say, of the infection.
Mm-hmm. So I want to, I want to present to you just some challenge, like historical challenges or even failures in this space, and kind of get your perspective on them. So we've seen attempts at universal flu vaccines, for instance, that try to similarly approach the commonality of flu viruses that haven't worked, right? I don't think that we've seen a whole lot of success in that space. What obviously this isn't you're not talking about developing a vaccine. You're talking about developing. Would you call it a therapeutic, like a prophylactic, a therapeutic?
Prophylactic, yes, I would call it a prophylactic. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess give us some insight. And again, I know it's early, but give us some insight into how you think your approach will overcome some of those failures that we've seen around the attempt to develop a therapeutic that focuses on these commonalities, right? That's quote unquote universal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It has been a tremendous challenge to do that and to find vaccines, against whole virus families, which has, of course, been tried before. So that's why also our approach as a prophylactic. So not so much, developing vaccine, but actually one step, I would say, quote unquote, easier to have a temporary protection against this broad range of viruses of a whole family, to give actually that temporarily protection. You should think about days or maybe weeks to have that protection at that point in time. Before there, for example, it's actually for two reasons. Before there's a vaccine for a certain virus. So if we take ourselves back, to the beginning of the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic, when there's no vaccine yet, but also potentially protecting on top of a vaccine. So to have that broad protection on top of vaccine for vaccines that work. Maybe not 100% for people that need them. So to take, to go back to your question, we think this is a slightly more achievable. We think it's still aiming beyond the moon, what we like to do, but we actually see positive results. But it's slightly, it's an easier step, quote unquote, than developing also a vaccine against, say, whole virus families. So that's the basically how we're thinking about that.
The Business of Biotech is brought to you in partnership with Cytiva. Together, we're committed to helping the leaders of new and emerging biopharma companies navigate the financial, organizational, human resources, and regulatory waters you'll encounter on your way from discovery to the clinic and beyond. Check out a host of useful resources for biotech leaders at Cytiva's Emerging Biotech Accelerator at cytivalifesciences.com/emerging biotech. That's CYTIVA lifesciences.com/emerging biotech. What sort of thought has gone into the manufacturing approach? And that I bring that question up in the context of some more potential challenges around, for instance, we know that parenteral biologics, there are, 300 some excipients that have been approved by the FDA. As you look forward to what the prophylactic might look like, do you anticipate challenges around regulatory considerations, because this is sort of uncharted territory in many ways? And two, do you anticipate capacity challenges or challenges around the expertise and the manufacturing of the prophylactic? Is that something you plan on handling in-house or hoping to outsource? If it's too early to say, just let me know, but I'm curious.
Yeah, no, I mean, yes, it's early, and we of course foresee that there are challenges, but that we, first of all, we like the challenges, and secondly, we're also thinking about them really ahead of them. So yes, we have of course thought about how to on the regulatory side, how to make sure that we can also prove the of course the premise that we have, that it actually can protect against the whole broad range of viruses. So and there we see multiple ways that we can actually test it against for example, different viral strains. And then for the production, at the moment we haven't built any manufacturing capacity ourselves yet, and working really with external parties, as we're doing with also on the development side, because we saw that works, the fastest, just to get this all done. Now, separately, we're also looking at in-house activities there, which we're building up in terms of labs, for example.
Yeah. Okay. When you survey the landscape as it sits today, the landscape for approved options for protection against viruses, what's your perception of that landscape? What do you see, and how do you anticipate that you'll do things differently, that your product will be different? Mm-hmm.
So I think, but if you look at the vaccine, so that we see that clearly as complementary, our products to vaccines. So first of all, before there is actually a vaccine against a specific virus, that we can protect against the new virus that might come up, whether it's a fully new zoonotic virus or an escape mutant, for example, of an existing virus, or just a seasonal strain that we don't have at that moment a vaccine for. And then on top of vaccines, so really complementary to vaccines. And when people go out to a crowded restaurant, on a flight, on a bus, they can actually then take that additional protection there. And we see that really as a prophylactic, so really in the middle of a vaccine, and then therapeutics against different viral infections, which we also think are very, very important. But we see that also very differently in the treatment paradigm of where we are. So we think complementing what we have currently with what we really see as a new wave of medicine, as we also described it, is preventing against virus that we don't know yet, but that we can already protect against that, and that therefore we see that quite unique positioned.
Yeah. So since you mentioned it, great segue. The administration concept. The idea here is to develop a product that can be self-administered, and is that correct?
Yes, exactly. Yep. That can be self-administered. Yeah.
Okay.
Intranasally.
Yep, intranasal self-administration, and the idea would be what? So I'm a consumer, right? I'm a consumer. I'm living my life. It's a dangerous life. This life, right? we're all living a dangerous life. Yes. What's your vision for at what point Matt Pillar, the consumer, should be self-administering a prophylactic to help me avoid getting very, very sick?
Yes, no, absolutely. So I fully agree. Well, dangerous life, it's also a fantastic life. I highly believe in that. So I think on one hand, life is fantastic. We want to live our life to the fullest. On one other hand, like you said, you want to be protected to go out there, because I think we're breathing in billions and billions, actually whole galaxies of viruses, if you like, a number of stars in the galaxy of viruses in our lifetime. So basically protecting against that we think is very important, and to do that with something that people can administer themselves, we think that is also a highly added benefit. So what you've seen, of course, now, because of this pandemic, but also separately, is that a lot of people have difficulties with measures that are enforced upon them. I think they're very important, but a lot of people have difficulties with that and crave autonomy, and that what we think with an intranasal administration, where you administer it yourself, you protect yourself, and with that also others, but it gives you that autonomy that you actually control that yourself, rather than getting a shot, which I think is also very important. But it gives that empowerment, I think, to a lot of people, where people crave that as well. So we think that's an additional benefit of doing that in that way.
Yeah. So the idea would be, before I find myself in a situation where I'm likely to inhale this galaxy of potential harm, I would, similar to like Afrin, I would take a nasal spray before getting on the bus, before getting on an airplane, before going to a baseball game. Would that be it? I mean, would
Yes.
would it be okay?
Yeah.
And,
So you take the spray in the morning, and then you would be protected. I mean, we are still working out whether it's days, whether it's longer than that. It could also be as simple as just a spray a day, depending on our dosage. But at least think about it. You take it indeed, and then you're protected for a period of time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are you at a point yet where you can discuss what the manufacturing approach might look like?
Yeah, not at the moment. I mean, we have detailed that we're also already, of course, manufacturing for our ongoing studies and towards clinical studies. So we're doing that, but I unfortunately cannot go into much detail there at the moment. But
that's okay.
It's a complex to get a way to get it all, of course, together. But the great thing is that we have. And that's not me. I will be honest about it. But we have the great expertise on board of people who have done that before, and also external partners who are great at this.
Yep, excellent. Okay, so recent news: Leyden recently closed a successful Series A round of financing. I think that was earlier this year. That may be where I got confused about the founding of the company. So it was earlier this year you closed that Series A. What's the intention for that? What are you going to use that cash for to kind of expand the portfolio, build out the team? What are the plans there?
Yeah, no, I fully understand that, because there was also the time when we actually launched our public presence, right? We were under the radar until that, so that for the outside world, we didn't exist there before that time. So that's why. And it's a fantastic investor. So with Google, with GV, with F Prime, but also and Casting Capital, but also Brooke Byers as a private investor. I think it's a great group of investors who really help also pushing the plans forward and thinking about how to build out the company. And what we are doing with that investment is really advancing, on one hand, our platform, looking at this commonalities of viruses and attacking the virus where it attacks us, and then developing specific products against virus families that are most likely to cause a pandemic. So, and there we developing that in discovery, but also preclinical, and then as soon as possible into the clinic. Mm-hmm. And then next to that, building out the team. As you mentioned, we're indeed in both here in Europe, but also in the US, in Boston. So building out that on both sides, and that's where we use the proceeds to rapidly advance towards the vision of that we are ahead of the next virus. So we feel we're in a race to make sure that before the next virus hits us, we are ready.
Yeah. Can you speak yet to I guess the mechanistic action, like how the therapeutic might work? What's the prophylactic action that the therapy might induce?
Yes. Yeah. Unfortunately, not too much. But what I can say, and that I think that makes it also a bit visual, is that the molecules that we apply intranasally. So the compounds that they basically are ready to attack the virus and making sure that the virus cannot enter the cells and therefore start the replication cycle. So that's where we are focusing on to basically help the body fight these viruses so that they cannot replicate here in the nasopharyngeal area. And that's why we then prevent the further infection to the lower respiratory tract, and very importantly, the transmission to others as well.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, there's certainly an unmet medical need. I mean, if there ever was one, if we've demonstrated that over the course of the past 18 months for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
So what's the next big step? What's the next big step for Leyden Labs?
Yeah. So we're now, rapidly developing, on one hand the product. So and then secondly the platform. So all eyes are on that. So I think that's really an important step to really hit different milestones, bring our first product also into the clinic. So that's where we are fully focused on. While of course building out the fantastic team, and I think that's also we have a highly ambitious team, great expertise. I think sort of the expertise and also the experience and the way of working, you could say of like already a larger organization, but that's still with the nimbleness of a startup, so that's what I really enjoy doing, and that's where we are now fully focusing on, to also just deliver on the promises we have made, and just that's also hard work, Matt. It's just rolling up the sleeves and just going for it, and there everybody's dedicated, and we like to do that because we like to work with each other, but also on the mission that we set out for ourselves. So we don't mind going into that fully.
Yeah, well, it certainly is some hard work, but to your point, you've got an excellent team on board, and I appreciate the time that you took a break from rolling up those sleeves and putting in the hard work to talk with us a little bit about it. It'll certainly be, when we get to that point, an interesting clinical approach. I'll be interested in following up with you when you get to that point, because I think those clinical studies will certainly be interesting to follow. So hopefully you'll be amenable to coming back on and sharing some news from the clinic with us when you have that opportunity.
Of course, no, very happy to do so, and it's great talking to you. So very happy to come back at that point. Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk with you again soon.
Thank you very much, Matt.
So that's Leyden Labs CEO Koenraad Wiedhaup. I'm Matt Pillar, and this is the Business of Biotech. As always, big thanks to Cytiva for its partnership in the production of this podcast. Cytiva is a company committed to helping emerging biotechs navigate the early developmental, clinical, and regulatory waters, and offering resources to do so at its Emerging Biotech Accelerator, which I encourage you to check out at cytivalifesciences.com/emerging biotech. Also, check us out at bioprocessonline.com. And please, while you're there, sign up for my newsletter. Meanwhile, if you liked what you heard here, give us 5 stars. Subscribe to the pod so you don't miss an episode. And sincerely, thanks for listening.